Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Richard Pryor with a supercomputer. On this episode of the 80s Flick Flashback, I'm joined by guest co-host Laramy Wells to discuss the 80s flick sequel that all but torpedoed the Superman franchise with its focus on silly sight-gags instead of Man of Steel mythos. Will we defend the choice to replace arch-nemesis Lex Luthor with the billionaire Ross Webster? Will we be able to make sense of a synthetic Kryptonite and that epic junkyard brawl? Stay tuned as we kick off our brand new Summer of Sequels 2 series with our nostalgic views and rad review of Superman 3 from 1983 on this episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. Today, I'm so excited to have this returning co-host back on the show. He's a man who can break down a flick better than Gus's computer broke down global coffee bean supplies. And he's also the only person I know whose fortress of solitude is a Superman memorabilia-laden basement. It's Laramy Wells from Moving Panels Podcast. How you doing, Laramy?
I am good. My wife has proclaimed that this movie has the single greatest quote in movie history. I don't want to go to jail. They have robbers and rapists who rape robbers.
Yeah, I had that down as one of my favorite lines too. So, which I'm sure was completely ad-libbed by Richard Pryor. I have no doubt.
Had to be.
Yeah.
Had to be.
No doubt.
Writers of this movie could not have come up with something that good.
No, not even close. So, yeah, we'll get into favorite lines and we'll get into lots of scenes that I'm sure we'll want to discuss why this is in the movie and why they decided to do things. And we'll get into that as well.
Why is this in the movie is the question for the entire movie.
Why is this movie? That is the real question.
Go ahead and let everybody know. I'm a huge Superman fan, but this movie, wow.
Yeah.
Let's get ready.
Let's get into it. All right, Laramy, you know the drill. When did you see Superman 3 for the first time on television?
On television, yes. I can't pinpoint an exact day, time, year, or anything. I know I had to have seen it on television when I was a kid, probably on Channel 36 here in Atlanta, WATL, because that was a lot of what they did was just show movies because they weren't really an official network. They later became Fox, but until then, it was just, that was the place to watch movies. Most of the movies you asked me about, that's the answer, as I saw it on WATL.
Yeah, in the 90s, it was the 80s channel, right? As far as 80s movies.
Absolutely.
Channels. Yeah. All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I tried to remember if I saw this in the theater. I don't really have a distinct memory of seeing this in the theater, but I know I've seen it a lot. So it had to have been one that we either rented and I watched a bunch of times, checked out at the library, or it was just on cable all the time. Like I remember Superman 2 being on HBO, like on repeat when it came out. And this was probably kind of the same thing. It probably ran on HBO a lot as well. So I think it's just one of those movies, like in the summer, it was probably on like every day. And we would just, come in from the heat, tired of playing baseball or, kickball or whatever we were playing outside and wanted to enjoy the air conditioning for a couple hours. And it was on, so we'd watch it. But how long has it been since you rewatched it before rewatching it for the podcast?
A year or two. I know that you and I covered it for my podcast, I think 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure if I've watched it since then, but definitely 2 years ago when we covered it for my podcast. Because this isn't one that I'm jumping the gun to go see, but if you didn't know, but if you're a fan of the show, Laramy has covered all of them at this point because we just did the Superman 4 episode that is already out on his podcast. So, but we did Superman 3 a couple years ago. I was also his first guest for his very first episode, which was 1978 Superman. Then we did a crossover Superman 2 episode for both of our shows where one of us talked about the Lester cut, I think you did, and then I talked about the Donner cut. So we kind of split that into 2 episodes. So definitely go check those out. So, so I have not covered the original Superman because it came out in 78, but we redid Superman again
for your 100th episode. So lots of Superman content, of course, on moving panels, which with, as you can tell by Laramy's background, he's a huge fan of Superman. So that's why he's covered them all. And I believe the plan next is to go to Superman Returns, which was the next Superman live action movie that we'll cover.
Yeah, staying chronological, Superman Returns, even though there's a nice big gap, but that would be next. Although we did talk about maybe going back a little bit and doing the TV movie musical.
Yeah. That aired. Yeah. And you know what? Yeah. And you know, every time we do one of these Superman movies, we always talk about Smallville. And I'm just going to have to break down and go back and watch it, because I watched the first couple of seasons, but I never watched the full run of the show. And whenever we talk about it, it brings up some nostalgia about it. So I'm going to have to, at some point, maybe this summer, well, you know, a lot of stuff is, you know, reruns and reality shows. I can binge that over the summer. So might be a fun one. I know.
And I'm going to currently rewatching it.
Yeah, because you're going to cover it on something here pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, my daughter has finally decided to sit and watch it. And so she and I have been watching it episode by episode. She has finished season 1, and we actually covered it. And her reaction to season 1, and now we're in season 2, and we should be wrapping that one up pretty soon too. But yeah, I mean, she's got 10 seasons to get through.
Yeah, but that's the thing with like shows that have that longevity. It's like, okay, I've got to commit that if I start it, I'm gonna finish it. So. Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about story origin and pre-production. So we kind of covered some of this in the other episodes as well. But just for a recap for everyone, Richard Donner confirmed that he had been interested in writing at least 2 more Superman films, which he intended Tom Mankiewicz to direct, and use Brainiac as the villain of the 3rd film. Donner departed the series during the production of Superman 2, well documented. Go back to our Superman 2 episode to hear that. In December of 1980, producer Ilya Salkind wrote a treatment for this film that included Brainiac, Mr. You say, you got to say it. I can't say it.
Mxyzptlk.
Yeah. We'll just call him Mr. Mixie going forward.
There you go. That'll work.
So it included Brainiac, Mr. Mixie, and Supergirl. The treatment was finally released online in 2007, if you dare go read it, but here's a synopsis. Mr. Mixie was portrayed in the outline varies from his comic counterpart as he uses his abilities to cause chaos. Dudley Moore was the first choice to play the role. For 1980, that's 100%.
It's not bad. Yeah,
that would land very well. In the treatment, Brainiac was from Kalu, sure. Yeah, and had discovered Supergirl in the same way that Superman was found by the Kents. Brainiac is portrayed as a surrogate father to Supergirl and eventually fell in love with his quote-unquote daughter, cringe, who did not reciprocate his feelings as she had fallen in love with Superman, which still sounds weird. Brainiac retaliates by using a personality machine to corrupt and manipulate Superman. The climax of the film would have seen Superman, Supergirl, Jimmy Olsen, Lana Lang, and Brainiac time travel to the Middle Ages for a final battle against Brainiac. After defeating him and leaving Brainiac behind, Superman and Supergirl would have married at the end of Superman 3 or in Superman 4. The treatment was rejected as being too complex and expensive to shoot, and also for being terrible. Because of the high budgets required for the series, the Salkinds considered selling the rights to the series to Dino De Laurentiis, but he passed. The significance of computers, the corruption of Superman, and the splitting of Superman into good and evil would be used in this final version of the film. It was originally intended to be titled Superman vs. Superman, which I think is a pretty cool title, but was retitled after the producers of Kramer vs. Kramer threatened a lawsuit. Why? I have no idea. Yeah, like these are 2 totally different movies. Why would you feel like they're trying to, steal your thunder for some reason?
Yeah. I mean, not as stupid as making Superman and Supergirl fall in love.
Yes.
Did anybody read a comic?
Right. Because they're cousins in the comics, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cousins. Their dads are brothers. They are cousins.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
just weird.
I love, give us Brainiac. I think Mxyzptlk would be a great, and it's kind of funny that Dudley Moore was considered because there's a lot of similarity you could probably put into Dudley Moore's character in Santa Claus.
Yeah. Which we've covered on the podcast.
Yeah. And it's also a Salkind.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Wanting to duplicate the success of Superman by making a Santa Claus movie.
Santa Claus, the movie.
The movie.
Yeah. Man, that would have been a bad movie.
Not that this is that much better, but It
No,
definitely
but
went
it's better than that would have
yeah,
been.
yeah. It went in a different direction, that's for sure. So, all right, well, let's jump into casting. So I'll read this little blurb and then we'll kind of get into some of the cast. Like most of the movies for our summer sequel series, because they're sequels, we're not going to cover everyone in as detail as we would during regular episodes because we've covered them in previous episodes that you can go back and listen to their filmography and that kind of stuff. So, but both Gene Hackman and Margot Kidder are said to have been angry with the way the Salkinds treated Superman director Richard Donner, with Hackman retaliating by refusing to reprise his role of Lex Luthor. After Margot Kidder publicly criticized the Salkinds for their treatment of Donner, the producers reportedly punished Kidder by reducing her role in Superman 3 to a brief appearance. Hackman later denied such claims, saying that he had been busy with other movies and that making Luthor a constant villain would be similar to horror movie sequels where a serial killer just keeps coming back. Hackman would eventually reprise his role as Lex Luthor in Superman 4, which the Salkinds had no involvement in. In the commentary for the 2006 DVD release of Superman 3, Salkind denied any negative feelings towards Margot Kidder, and his production team had denied the claim that her part was cut for retaliation. Instead, the creative team said they decided to pursue a different direction for a love interest for Superman, believing the Lois and Clark relationship had been overdone in the first two films. With the choice to give a more prominent role to Lana Lang, the role of Lois was reduced for story reasons. Salkind also denied the reports about Hackman being upset with him, stating that he was unable to return because of other film commitments. Believe what you want.
Yeah. It's hard to tell what actually is the truth in all of that. But I do agree with Hackman is
Yes.
that having Lex as the villain in every movie does get a little redundant. I mean, at least in 2, you bring in Zod, and
Right.
and that kind of Lex just is kind of trying to play a part in all of that, but at least Zod is the main villain. And then they do that again in 4 by having Lex create Nuclear Man, so Nuclear Man's more. And it could have worked in this one almost in the same way that they end up doing with Webster. Is they could have done a Brainiac thing, which is clearly where this one was inspired. So they could have done a Brainiac thing, still maybe had Lex be a part of it, but I totally do agree that Lex doesn't need to be the villain in every movie. I also have absolutely no problem with Lana Lang in this.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I know we'll talk about her in a minute, but I love Annette O'Toole.
Yep.
And so absolutely. But yeah, I mean, it does feel kind of weird that Lois is there and then she was like, all right, I'm off. And then, just shows up at the end. It does feel a little weird, but
with her heavy tan makeup to make her look she's been in
yeah,
Bermuda for a month or whatever. Yeah. If you want to do something different than Lex, why create Ross Webster, which is kind of a lesser version of Lex Luthor, but they eventually made more. They made the Lex Luthor character more like him late after this.
Yes. Yeah. Because before Lex was just the criminal mastermind. You go back to the first movie. I mean, his lair is an abandoned, subway station underground. And then of course that continues in the second one. And so it was really the character of Ross Webster that really gave the idea of, well, what if Lex was more powerful,
right,
as a person? Like, what if he had more stout and more clout? I guess is more the word I'm looking for.
Right.
So making him this businessman, this. That is what I think is one of the best things to come out of this movie. Is it gave us the Lex Luthor that we are more familiar with.
Right.
I mean, when Lex was introduced in the comics, he was more of just a mad scientist. And so that's actually one of the things I like about Superman 4 is it merges all of the different versions of Lex together. But then, we get more of the billionaire, millionaire, whatever he actually is, businessman that we got more of in the 90s with the Lois and Clark TV show.
Right.
Of course, the Michael Rosenbaum version in Smallville. And then apparently now and even I almost forgot Jesse Eisenberg.
Well, there's a reason that you want to forget that one.
And then that we're about to get with Nicholas Hoult in the new Superman movie.
Right.
I will say, obviously, Kevin Spacey's has a twist to that, but he is a continuation of the Lex Luthor from Superman 2.
Right.
So he doesn't quite have the business aspect. He's more just looking for that real estate con that Lex came up with.
Right. All right, well, let's talk about the GOAT, the Superman.
The GOAT.
That will always be our Superman, the late, great Christopher Reeve. He had been contracted for 7 films as Superman. He engaged a lawyer to renegotiate his contract. Yeah, prior to production. Producer Pierre Spengler described the process of securing Reeve's return as contentious, though Ilya Salkind recalls that Reeve approved of the Superman 3 script and was more than willing to reprise his role. Believe what you want.
Why had they cast another Superman?
Yeah, right. And that,
I don't know if you have that in
no,
your notes,
I don't, but yeah, let's talk about it.
They had already planned to start casting other Supermen. They were already looking at other people. Man, just to think that there was almost, and this was for both Superman 3 and Superman 4, like they were so close to casting various people. The worst offense would have been Tony Danza.
Hey, yo, away. Yeah, that was...
No, thank you.
He's no longer a reporter. He's driving a cab in Metropolis.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah, not the best.
Yeah, who might be the boss? Tony Danza. Who might be Superman? Not Tony Danza. No
offense to Tony Danza if you're listening.
No, I like.
We
Tony
love
Danza.
you. Yeah, I love Tony Danza. I love Who's the Boss. Love Taxi. But
yeah, you're not Superman, boy.
Right.
You're not Superman. We can probably think of some other superhero characters you could have played in the 80s, but Superman ain't one of them. I'm sorry.
Yep. So yeah, and this is also the first time Christopher Reeve had top billing in a Superman movie. In the 78 Superman, he was behind Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman. And then in Superman 2 in 1980, he was behind Hackman. So this was his first time.
And I'm surprised he's not behind Richard Pryor.
Yeah, exactly.
In this one.
Yeah.
Because when this movie starts, you don't know it's a Superman movie.
You don't. I have no clue. Oh gosh. The opening is terrible. We were not there yet, but yeah, it's just...
No, but I'm not even talking about the opening credits scene.
Yeah, but it starts with Gus. Like, it feels like it's Gus's movie from the beginning.
Yes. It feels like you're watching a clip out of, Silver Bullet or
Bustin' Loose or The Toy or any of the other Richard Pryor movies that had already come out at that point.
No indication it's a Superman movie when this movie starts.
No. Yeah. Okay. All right, moving on. So we won't talk about Christopher Reeve's filmography. We've covered it already. We also already talked about Margot Kidder as Lois Lane. We talked about
Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman's not in this one. We talked about
that's right.
Jackie Cooper as Perry White, Mark McClure as Jimmy Olsen. So we'll kind of move.
Who they also get rid of by having him break his leg.
Yeah. So we'll talk about Richard Pryor, even though we've covered Richard Pryor in Brewster's Millions, so you can go back and listen to that for his filmography. But are you aware of how he got this role? Like, why was Richard Pryor in this movie?
Because of Johnny Carson.
That's right. After an appearance on The Tonight Show, he told Johnny Carson how much he enjoyed seeing Superman and Superman 2, and Pryor jokingly stated his desire to appear in a future Superman installment. The Salkinds were eager to cast him in a prominent role in the third film, using the success of his movies Silver Streak, Stir Crazy, and The Toy. His casting would also help them attract Richard Lester back to return and direct, because Lester was eager to work with Pryor, who appealed to his comedic sensibilities. And boy, oh boy, did he ramp that up. I call this, they didn't give subtitles to this one. We didn't get the subtitle until Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. But if I gave this one a subtitle, it'd be Superman 3, The Comedy. Because it leans so heavy into trying to be so funny and like a comedy. It almost at times becomes a parody of a Superman movie.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and I know we'll probably talk about it more and more throughout the episode.
Lots
that opening credit scene just feels like you're watching, a Three Stooges type bit, or you're watching.
Right.
I don't know. I know that this is a little before the time, but not necessarily, because you got movies like Airplane, or even some of the Mel Brooks stuff. Like
exactly. Yeah.
That's or even going back to movies like It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. Like that's what the opening of this movie feels like.
Yeah.
By the way, I want to correct myself. I said Silver Bullet earlier for Richard. I meant Silver Streak.
Silver Streak. Yeah. I was like, yeah. I knew Silver was right, but I didn't think the other part was. Yeah.
So Silver Bullet is a totally different movie. It's a Stephen King werewolf movie.
All right, well, let's continue with casting. Then we've got the lovely Annette O'Toole as Lana Lang. A little bit about her filmography. She is known for playing Lisa Bridges in the TV series Nash Bridges, adult Beverly Marsh in the 1990 television miniseries adaptation of Stephen King's epic horror novel It.
Yes.
She was Kathy in the romantic comedy film Cross My Heart, and she also was Martha Kent on the television series Smallville,
in which she also just is amazing.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny because even when I saw her on this and forgot that she was in it until I was rewatching it, and I was like, I feel like she's been in so much. Like, I feel like her filmography is much bigger than this, and she has like a lot of small roles. But I think because I think I not fell in love with her, but I became a fan of her during Smallville because I think that's probably the one thing that I watched more of her in. So seeing her in this was like, oh man, it was so good to see her. At that time. And of course, if you're a fan of the Netflix show Virgin River, she's a main character on that show as well. So what's more current show, and she's really good on that too. Very much not, she's more the Lois Lane character in Virgin River. She's much more direct and speaks her mind than the Lana Lang character that's a little bit more ditzy. We'll kind of get into that too.
Yeah, she's a little too ditzy, but no, Annette O'Toole is just great. I love her as Lana Lang. I wish there was more the more development with that character and their relationship. I just wish there was a little bit more. But yeah, then she's great as Martha Kent in Smallville, just amazing. Of course, I probably lock in on Beverly Marsh from It.
Well, yeah,
where I'm not saying my favorite role of hers, but that's probably where I
first introduced.
First was introduced to her. But then also, not to mention, or I guess to mention, because I'm about to, but the fact that she wrote a lot of the music for A Mighty Wind, the Christopher Guest movie.
Oh, I forgot about that. That's right.
Along with her husband, Michael McKean.
Yeah.
They wrote, and I think even got Oscar nominated for a couple of the songs. So, yeah, amazingly talented.
Yeah. And she has admitted to being a big fan of comic books and was as a child and was thrilled to be cast as Lana Lang, one of her favorite characters. Now, I'll ask you this question because this is how I felt. Do you think she had better chemistry with Christopher Reeves than
100%.
Margot Kidder? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. This relationship seems so much more believable. Even though Superman 1 and 2 are better movies than this, the chemistry between Lana Lang or between Annette O'Toole and Christopher Reeve is much more palpable in this one.
Absolutely. In fact, not to jump into the next movie, but they did not know what to do with the relationship between Lois and Clark. That in the fourth movie, they just redo the storyline from the first movie.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah. No, 100% that Lana and Clark have more chemistry, that you do kind of, like we said, we want more of it. Whereas I had no problem with Lois leaving at the beginning of this movie.
Right. All right, moving right along, we've got Annie Ross as Vera Webster. She was the sister and partner of Ross in his company and plans. She was played by, I said Annie Ross, who was a British-American singer and actress, best known as a member of the influential jazz vocal trio Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross. Her film roles included Mrs. Hazeltine from Throw Mama from the Train, 87, Rose Brooks in Witchery in 1988. She played Loretta Crestwood in Pump Up the Volume in 1990. She also had roles in Robert Altman's Shortcuts and Blue Sky, but she also appeared as Granny Ruth in the horror films Basket Case 2 from 1990 and Basket Case 3, The Progeny in 1991.
Never heard of any of those.
I think I might have seen the VHS case for those or the DVD case for those, but never seen them.
I will say, though, she is a trooper for taking all of the insults.
Yes.
That she is given in this movie, because they are bad.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of comedy where it's like completely demeaning the other person. Like, I know that was kind of like a thing in the 70s and 80s,
Yeah, but there were some people who could do it well. Like,
right. Yeah.
Like, you think of like Don Rickles. Like
Rickles, where it's roasting, but yeah.
Yeah, he was an insult comic, but it was always, you felt like it was in fun, and it was more of in jest.
Right.
But,
right.
Yeah,
this was just mean.
One, this was, and And it probably would have been different if all of it came from Ross,
But
but
it
it
doesn't.
didn't.
Right.
Like right off the bat, we see the picture of her and Perry White's talking about how blurry it looks. And they're like, no,
No,
that's
that's really
just
her.
how she
That's her face.
looks. And I'm like, how does a person look blurry
Right.
naturally?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
All right.
So we'll
Well,
probably talk.
what a trooper.
We'll probably talk about more of the fact that this movie is not nice to women at
No,
all.
it's not. It's not.
Not just this character, all of them.
So on the other side, you've got Pamela Stevenson as Lorelai Ambrosia, who was the yoga instructor, psychic
Nutritionist.
There you go. That's a psychic nutritionist. Yeah, because that's a thing.
Huh?
Stevenson appeared in British TV shows including Space 99, New Avengers, The Professionals, and Tales of the Unexpected before her breakout role alongside Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean himself, Mel Smith, and Griff Rhys-Jones in the satirical sketch show Not the 9 O'Clock News from 1979 to 82. She also had a role in Mel Brooks's comedy History of the World Part 1 from 1981, of Laramy's favorites. Richard Lester says that he actually wanted her for the part based on her performances in Not the 9 O'Clock News.
I got to go find out who she is in History of the World Part 1.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a small... I mean, there's so many different vignettes in that. It's like she could be in any of them, so hard to place. But yeah, and I think she was the first non-American to be cast, the first non-American female cast in Saturday Night Live, like in the mid 80s as well.
Yes.
Like I think for one season, she was not well received.
Well, the Saturday Night Live in the 80s was
not well received, right?
Not at least not until the end.
Yeah, late 80s, early 90s.
Late
kind of
80s started to get better, but
yeah. But I don't have much to say about her character. It's very,
no, again,
it's very stereotypical.
Yeah. I mean, I do at least like that they give her where she's secretly intelligent, but almost from the complete other end of the sister, like just making her just an object for the most part.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, again, starting right off with that clip inside the Daily Planet where Jimmy's got all these photos, and the majority of the board are photos of her, and then they proceed to have close-ups, including one that is just of her cleavage.
Right.
So yeah, just making her an object. Again, because you got Lois, that Margot Kidder, that they just completely, let's just kick her out of the movie. But of course, when they do, the way she leaves is by holding up this really skimpy bikini.
Right.
Like you're
going to show that to your boss before you go on vacation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this Lois Lane really doesn't care.
Right.
But then you've got Lana, who's probably one of the best portrayed female characters, but they still give her this ditziness that just doesn't seem to fit. Then you've got, as we just talked about, you got Vera, who it's just to throw insults at, and then you got this character Ambrosia, who is just, again, it's an object. She's just something to look at, even though they try, like I said, to give her this thing where she's highly intelligent. But they even have the scene where she's reading the book, tries to hide it, and then she just
she knocks
hides it.
She lays on the couch and knocks the pillow off the book, and it's still out in the open, and nobody notices.
That's probably because they're just looking at her, because she's just an object for the male view in this. Because it's just so bad, the portrayal of women in this one. I don't know if we want to say that it's a thing of the time, because you did just bring up History of the World. I mean, Mel Brooks is notorious for doing it as well.
Right.
So
yeah,
I don't know.
I think it was part of the time. It's parts.
Doesn't make it right. But
It didn't age well, as they would say, but it's very cringy to go back and look at it and know that was very normal back then. So. All right, let's talk about Robert Vaughn as Ross Webster. Vaughn had his breakthrough role as disabled drunken war veteran Chester A. Gwynn in The Young Philadelphians, earning him a 1960 Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. He also appeared in scores of films, notably in The Magnificent Seven in 1960, Bullet, A Bridge of Ramagen, and he was the voice of Proteus IV in Demon Seed in 1977. He's also very well known for being in the TV show The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which I think is what most people probably know him from. And that's probably what I recognized him from. He once stated in an interview that after the film was released, he decided to no longer show up at his son Cassidy's school because the students were horrified that he, quote unquote, almost killed Superman.
That's awesome, though. I ain't gonna
Yeah,
lie.
yeah, yeah. He played
That's
your role
awesome.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I will say, although I did know he was the Man from Uncle, that wasn't until later in life that I
Hmm.
experienced the Man from Uncle. To me, he was always the guy that bought the A team
Right.
in the
Yeah, that's
last,
right.
yeah,
That's right. The last
the
season.
last like season or two. I
Yeah.
can't remember,
Yep.
but yeah, to where he was the one that controlled what they did, and it was just weird.
Hmm.
That was when the A team. That's when they added the guy who did the special effects.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He became a member of the A team,
Hmm.
and then there was a girl as well
Yeah.
that,
They're trying to spice it
yeah,
up.
yeah, trying to rejuvenate it in the later years, and it didn't work.
No, no, it run its course. So Vaughn was not the original choice, according to the writers. They actually wanted Alan Alda because they wanted an actor who could be
See that?
ruthless without losing any charm. I agree with that as well.
That yeah, he can do that.
Yeah, I think that would. I think he would even be better in the role. I think he would. It would have separated him a little bit more from because Vaughn to me just seems to be playing Lex Luthor. Like he just seems to be have that same kind of matter of fact, speech or whatever. But yeah, I can see that. Salkind said in the DVD commentary that his choice was Frank Langella. And of course, Langella appeared as Perry White in Superman Returns in 2006.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Langella, not as much as Alan Alda.
Yeah, Langella would have been, I think, too intense. I don't think he would have, for what this movie ended up being, I don't think he would have fit.
Right.
The more cartoonish, comedic this movie was. I don't know. I know Frank Langella can do comedy, but
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
don't think he would have fit in this movie.
I agree with that. All right, wrapping it up, we've got Gavin O'Hurley as Brad Wilson, Anna's ex-boyfriend and Clark's high school bully. Most people know him as playing Chuck Cunningham in the first episodes of the TV sitcom Happy Days. He was also in films such as Never Say Never Again, Death Wish 3, and Willow. But yeah, he was Chuck Cunningham, the long-lost older brother.
Yeah. But again, if you're like me, you know him from Superman 3.
That's
What you know.
That's what you know him from.
Yeah.
All right. Then, if we got a few cameos, I wanted to mention. I thought worth mentioning. Aaron Smolnowski. Oh, yeah. Anyway, he played the baby Clark Kent in the original Superman in '78. He appears uncredited as the little boy waiting outside a photo booth while Clark Kent is changing into Superman, which I thought that was a great scene. I loved that. I thought it was a cool idea of having him changing in the booth, and you see the pictures of him transforming, and then of course he cuts off and just gives the kid the small piece of him as Superman, so he doesn't reveal his secret identity. So I thought that was a cool little
that kid would even know who Clark Kent was.
Not a clue.
But no, yeah, it is the best part of the opening credit sequence. Compared to all the crazy shenanigans and stupidity that happens throughout the rest. But yeah.
Then we've got Gordon Rawlings plays the man with the cap during the opening slapstick credits.
Speaking of the opening.
Yeah. He also appeared briefly in Superman 2 as the fisherman who sees the three supervillains land in the lake. Pamela Mendel, who played Mrs. Stokas, was also the diner waitress in Superman 2. And then my favorite cameo that we did not get to see was Frank Oz played a brain surgeon in a deleted scene from the montage of the supercomputer causing a nationwide power outage. It's included in the extended television version of the film and was broadcast in the UK in the late 80s. He also worked on puppet sequences, which were also deleted, but not included in any of the versions. But yeah, good. I love a good Frank Oz cameo. Him and Landis had their thing of always having each other pop up in their movies.
What would have been the puppet
I was trying to think, maybe part of the computer, maybe like
yeah, I can
the
see
supercomputer
that.
thing, because it is kind of like at one point, doesn't like the arms come out of the computer in that one scene where Vera gets pulled in, or am I imagining that?
Yeah, but I think I don't know if they're arms or anything, but I do think that he may have had something to do with just the technical aspects of maybe some of the computer stuff. I could see that. Yeah. Oh, that can. Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump into scenes. Iconic scenes. When someone says Superman 3, what is the first scene that you think of?
No, it's got to be the junkyard fight.
Of course, that is the iconic scene.
Yeah,
no doubt about it.
The junkyard fight, as well as evil Superman at the bar.
Yes. Yeah. That's a close second. Yeah.
Just because that one's been turned into a meme. And a GIF and all. But yeah, the actual fight between Clark and evil Superman is definitely the best part of this movie. And
yes.
and the part that you're going to think of the most. I mean, I'm sorry, Richard Pryor, but yeah, it's not any of your scenes. I'm sorry.
No, it's not. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that so they're like this movie feels like three different movies to me. Like it feels like a Richard Pryor movie about Gus trying to find a job and becoming this computer mastermind, which is amazing that he took one class and somehow knows how to control every computer known to man.
Which is apparently just telling the computer what to do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
like, that's all you got to do.
Right,
is
right.
tell the computer, like, yeah, break through security, and it does.
He invented ChatGPT before we knew what ChatGPT was.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's a movie that could have been its own movie without Superman at all. And then you've got the Superman movie that I wanted, which is him going back for his high school reunion, him, rekindling with Lana. I don't know what the villain aspect. Maybe it's just him trying to. Do I want to go back to Metropolis and be Superman, or do I see myself settling down and being just Clark with enjoying love without the risk of being a superhero? That to me could have been its own story.
And you still could have had the evil Superman aspect of it. You could have had where I know on the way to Smallville they stop at this factory that for some odd reason is creating acid.
Right.
But you could have had something where maybe somebody, some scientist was studying Kryptonite and does something to the Kryptonite that, causes it to have a different reaction to Superman unknowingly. I'm not saying they're doing any of this
exactly
to be the villain.
Yeah.
And then Superman, maybe during a rescue, maybe they could have still had a very similar scene where fire breaks out. He gets exposed to this modified Kryptonite, and they still have that part of the movie. And that is the conflict.
Yes.
It's good Superman and bad Superman. So, definitely could have kept this more focused in Smallville, had more of the Lana stuff, fleshed that out a little bit, honestly had more of Christopher Reeve being Clark.
Yeah, exactly.
I also feel there's a lack of Clark Kent in this movie.
There is. I agree with that 100%. Yeah, so like that, so for that scene, like I understand the evil Superman or the evil Superman is flying away after having the confrontation with the boy who's saying, that kind of reminds him of who he's supposed to be. And then he lands in the junkyard and Clark Kent just kind of comes out. And it was kind of jarring at first, like when I was rewatching it, because it was like, I would have liked some kind of like already some conflict of maybe hearing Clark Kent's voice, or like there being this internal monologue that we heard of the two kind of fighting internally before it became this external battle. It's still great, but I just wish there was a little bit better of a setup for it that made a little bit more sense.
Having Clark either as just a voice, or it was the 80s, having the little like ghostly Clark head talking to him, or even more 80s, having clips of just like in a black void of Clark and evil Superman arguing with each other, like it's in his mind.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A la when Mork talks to the leaders in Mork and Mindy. He's always just in that black black void.
Mork calling Orson.
Yeah.
Irk to Orson. Yeah.
But having that same idea, it definitely would have, I think it would have made a better movie. It definitely would have been different, because you didn't, up until the moment when Clark and evil Superman face each other, you wouldn't have had any type of battle. But I still, I think that definitely would have made for a better movie.
Yeah. And another thing I didn't understand was this whole time that evil Superman is being evil Superman, it's not like he's doing things in secret. They see him doing these diabolical things, like he blows out the Olympic torch and like, but there's no like coverage of the news or anybody like what happened to Superman. Like seems like no repercussions for that. Like nobody's wondering what happened. And so,
you do have the street vendor who gets very upset when he straightens the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
So
and
unnecessary.
Gets upset again when he fixes it at the end.
Yeah, which was actually an idea that was actually an idea that Lester wanted for Superman 2, but they ended up not using it, so he just repurposed it for Superman 3. Why not?
Which is still better than him fixing the Great Wall of China in Superman 4.
Yeah, a lot of physics problems in this one.
Look, physics
get into it?
problems is one thing. Superman having abilities that make absolutely zero sense to Superman
Right, right.
is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, we had the cellophane S in Superman
Oof.
2.
Oof.
Um,
That was the beginning of the
yeah,
end. The
yeah.
beginning of
I
the
mean,
decline.
yeah, and of course I will say though the mind erasing kiss to Lois that he also does
Yes.
um in Superman 2, that at least has a little bit of a comic connection because he's done something similar in early comics. But and then yeah, Superman 4, the blue laser out of his eye that can fix the Great Wall of China. But yeah, this one with his just the way they do some of his powers, I don't do they do anything that's not a Superman power in this one, or do they just use his powers in a weird way?
I mean, he uses his vision, like, he reseals the tanker with the oil amazingly not spilling out of it, which that's another physics issue I didn't
Yes,
understand.
yeah, but that's not about his powers,
Right, right. I mean,
other than the fact that
he freezes
if
part of the lake. Yeah.
yes, but then he picks up the lake with the lake still being there.
Right.
And then there is the fact that the way he's holding the frozen lake would make zero sense
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as he's flying, how it wouldn't break apart
Or
or
melt.
anything. Yes. Or, yeah, whether due to the heat as he's traveling or whether it's the friction
Mm-hmm.
flying through the wind. And then let's just go ahead and get to the fact that when he does drop it and it starts to rain, where are the fishes?
Yeah.
There should be fishes falling. There should be fish, alive, dead, I don't care. There should be fish falling because there's no way that lake contained no
Yeah. Yeah.
creatures at all. No
Yeah.
sea life at all.
Yeah. I want a deleted scene where a guy was fishing in the lake and then he froze the part where his pole is still in the lake. So when he picks it up, the guy's holding onto his pole,
He's
like,
just
"Hey, give me my
hanging.
fish."
Yeah. He's just hanging. Well, but then of course he'd fall.
He would fall to
plummet
his death. Yeah.
death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, I can't think of any specific powers that he uses that aren't Superman powers in this one that I can remember.
Is there something he does when he's fighting the supercomputer that maybe I know there's things that happen to him
Right. Yeah.
because he gets a taste of his own medicine by he gets wrapped up inside of a cellophane bubble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That happens to him.
But there are some things in his powers that don't make sense, like the opening sequence when the guy is drowning in the car, and instead of just using his light vision to break the glass or open the door, he flies as slow as he could walk over there.
Yes. Yeah, a good 4 feet above the ground,
Right,
just slowly flies over there.
I've got plenty of time. He'll be okay.
Yeah, he could have gotten there a lot quicker.
Yeah. And then what was the
I
other
also
one
like when he picks up the burning penguin, takes the fire out, and then sends the penguin back into the road. Yeah, didn't get that.
Yeah. Or then the other one where at the fire where the people are on the scaffold or what, they're up too high, and so they're like, how's he gonna get them? He could have flew and picked them up and carried them down, but instead he burns or uses his eyes to burn off a tube that we assume has no kind of exhaust fumes or anything that would
should have been excruciatingly hot.
Yes, exactly, but safe for them to slide down. So yeah, lots of problems. All right, well, do you have any favorite scenes in this movie?
No.
Okay, good. I don't either.
Nah. Other than the junkyard.
Yeah, I mean that's the highlight.
Fight.
That and the scenes with him and Lana, some of them are problematic, but
yeah,
I do like
love
them.
that. So in their reunion, there is this picture of Clark Kent without his glasses on, right on the stage. How no one is putting two and two together. You know what? Clark looks a lot like Super, because the whole idea behind the Clark Kent persona is that he's got the glasses, yes, but it's supposed to be that he is someone that you don't think about, that you don't consider,
right?
But the fact that he's got this, I guess, senior picture of him looking all proper and again with no glasses, you would think. But then then I start getting into just the crazy stuff that someone thought to write into this. I get that it's Kansas and it's supposed to be kind of small town America, but the fact that they have their reunion, and then the next day, as Lana and Clark are cleaning up, Lana goes, "Oh, there's so much potato salad left over."
Yeah.
Who has potato salad at a high school reunion?
Right.
Why was it such a big bowl of potato salad? And why was it just sitting out all night?
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh.
That and then they have their picnic
Yeah.
in the tallest grass they could find in Smallville.
Yeah. Such a weird spot.
In the middle of a possible coming, Kansas tornado.
Yeah. Because you can hear the thunder in the background. Like I'm expecting a storm to break up the picnic.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's thunder that scares the dog off.
Yeah.
Which is what makes Danny run after. And then you're seeing the wind blowing again this wheat field that they are sitting in. And then, and I do like as Clark's going through the stuff, it's green stuff. I mean, it's a funny little bit.
Yeah.
And then him eating the dog food.
Yeah.
Especially the fact that after she tells him the dog food, he's like, it's good. Like,
right. He's just going to keep eating it. Yeah.
Yeah. But then Lana sees that she has an oil leak. How? The grass is so high. You are sitting lower than the car is, but yet you can see an oil leak that is on the other side of the car. How did Lana see that? How?
No clue.
Yeah, and then the fact that her son happens to trip and fall on the one and only rock
that just happens to be in the path of the
excavators, or whatever you call them. Yeah.
And then
harvesters.
Harvester. Yeah. And then why does Superman feel he has to destroy the harvester to save the boy? Like, couldn't he have picked him up and carried him away, or was he afraid he would get hurt worse? Like, that part just didn't make sense to me.
Also, how far did that kid make it that Superman had to fly that far?
Right.
You see him flying from what appears to be miles away, headed towards, like, why? How? And then and he picks up the kid, flies the kid, leaves the dog there. So how he then
brings the dog out of the...
I get the Superman fast, but how did he then get back, get the dog, get changed, and get underneath the drain, which once again proves how much higher the car was than they were.
Right.
With him coming out of the drain with the dog and little Billy, Danny, whatever the kid's name was, because I don't care.
Right.
How he doesn't all of a sudden go, wait, how was the dog there? I just chased the dog.
Well, he's got a head injury, so, he probably doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. And how Lana cannot put two and two together.
Yeah.
She is standing in the gymnasium. She is standing next to a giant picture of Clark without glasses, standing next to Clark. Then during when Superman rescues her son, she is standing there looking directly at Superman, guy that she's known all her life and has clearly had feelings for. And I'm sorry, the one thing Christopher Reeve doesn't do a extremely great job of is his voice isn't that different.
No.
Christopher Reeve is a great Clark Kent. He's a great Superman. He does a great job, but his voice doesn't change that much. And so when he's talking to Lana, how Lana doesn't go, your voice sounds so familiar. And then I won't even talk about the ring. Like, how she believes that a reporter, a beat reporter for the Daily Planet was able to afford that ring. And I get there's a lot out there that can prove that the Clark Kent disguise, even though Superman's the disguise, Clark Kent's the real person, that it can work. I just think with someone like Lana, shouldn't. That's all I gotta say. And if anything proves that, it is the show Smallville. Let's just go ahead and be clear with that. Because even Lois, like, she's figured it out.
Yes, there's always that moment in the other movies where she's like right on the brink of making the connection and then gets distracted or something happens. Yeah.
Well, even in this movie, they have where he's telling them about going back to Smallville and he holds up his sweater that's
with
got
the S on
the chest. And Lois kind of gives that look of, wait a minute.
That looks kind of familiar when you hold it like that. Yeah.
And you even see Clark look down and realize what he's doing.
Right.
Let's
not
do
for
that.
Smallville. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump into some trivia. Maybe we'll think about some other scenes. So
give me more scenes to bash.
Yeah. We don't have enough time to cover them all. The writers of the film Office Space utilize the storyline of taking a fraction of a penny from employees for their own gain, stating that they saw it work in the movie Superman 3. So what a way to steal an idea and then in pure fashion let you know where the idea came from. You know, it worked in
which I
Superman
love.
3. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
I love that is a legit thing. I also, however, you gave me something else to bash.
Yeah.
The guy then bringing it to Webster's attention about how you're being robbed. They robbed you. They stole $85,000 or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they're like, well, maybe he'll slip up. And he goes, no, he won't slip up. He's too smart for that. First, I'm going, wait, how do you not know who it is? Because you cut him a check.
Right.
He had to put in his employee ID number to take the money. So how do you not know what it is? That and the guy's explanation of, back when we used to do this on paper with books and all that, this would not have happened. I'm just like, there's even a better way you could have caught him though, because of the computer. Like, and I'm not even going to go to computers nowadays where you can trace which computer was being used. He put in his employee ID.
Right. But instead they're convinced by a true non Richard Pryor driving a red sports car.
Yes. Which only doesn't work because they linger on him a little too much after he parks.
Right.
Like when he drives in, yes, it's an overhead shot, so you just see the hair and it's fine. But then when they linger on him as he's getting out, he slightly tilts his head up, and you're just like, that ain't Richard Pryor.
Yeah, it could be that guy, but it's not Gus. And let's talk about Richard Pryor for a minute, because a lot of the problems with this movie, and I don't think it's Richard Pryor's fault. I think they were just trying to cash in on his celebrity and his style of comedy because it was popular at the time, but there were too many moments that was just him riffing that wasn't needed. The him showing up to Smallville during the presentation, the birthday party, where he comes dressed as General Patton and has this long speech. Like, who's going to stand and let some guy just come up and start having this long speech that, in essence, doesn't really do anything besides just give moments for Richard Pryor to try to be funny? And then, him, buying the suit to fool Lana's ex-boyfriend and, that works at the company that he really doesn't need to sneak into.
It's owned by Webster. King it says it on the door. It says Websco, company or whatever it says.
Yeah.
So why does he need to quote unquote break in? Why does he need couldn't have Webster just given him access?
Right.
I mean, I get that it was to make for the comedic element of it. And then why does a wheat company have this government computer
that needs two keys? Gosh, yeah.
And access to this weather satellite when does a weather satellite control the weather?
Like, when the computer tells it to.
Yeah. This movie does not know how computers work.
No, not at all.
It's a weather satellite. It's there to read weather conditions, which means it must be able to control the weather. We can obviously shoot a beam at some country and make it a storm, a hurricane, a tornado. That's clearly what these satellites are built to do.
Yeah, and then the one scene that makes the least amount of sense is after he's telling his story on the ski slope on the top of an office building downtown.
Yeah. Which I guess we're to assume he also did with the weather satellite.
I guess, yeah. But then he falls off the roof on the skis and lives.
Yeah, doesn't shatter his legs.
Right. Doesn't lose the blanket or whatever that he put on over his back. That when he's when he's actually on the road in the middle of the street, you can see where it's sewn into his shirt. Like you can see this. I noticed that this time. I was like, you could tell it was sewn in. Like, lose it. But anyway,
even Richard Pryor though didn't like. Even Gus looks and goes, "How in the world did I survive that?" Right.
And once again, for what purpose? What was the purpose of that scene? Nothing but just to give Richard Pryor some kind of sight gag, funny moment that really wasn't.
Yeah, which speaking of going and just doing something for the sake of having a gag, when he is controlling all computers everywhere, apparently.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So the ATM makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All of a sudden the ATM is spitting out money. makes sense. Even the Bloomingdale's, like having it so it creates this bill for, $700,000 or whatever it was.
Mhm.
That makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that Gus is sitting there just in a few minutes.
Mhm.
He hasn't been sitting there for days. He's just been sitting there yet this Bloomingdale's bill has been printed, shipped, sent through the United States Postal Service, arrived at a guy's house, and at breakfast, he opens it up, and then in another way of completely horribly treating women,
Right.
he immediately thinks it's all his wife's fault and shoves a grapefruit or whatever it was into his wife's face.
Right.
Again, horrible treatment of women in this movie. But I haven't even gotten to the part I was actually getting to. I get that he can control traffic signals.
Oh
But
gosh.
how does the little red and green men come
Right.
to life
Right. And
to
fight each other.
That's not how computers work. That's not
Mhm.
how lights work.
Right. Oh, gosh.
Again, just meant for that funny little gag.
Yeah.
But
Same with like
And
the
I am
video
all-
game. Yeah, the video game when
yes,
the missiles are being fired at him and it looks like a video game where you actually see getting points for the bombs going off around Superman.
Yeah.
So bad.
Well, of course, it looks like a game because it was meant to be a game.
Right. It
I think Atari had planned to release that game.
went belly up thanks to ET
Yeah.
the game.
E.T. had come out the year before and tanked it, and then the Nintendo would come out like a year or two later.
Mhm.
So Atari was at their end. But anyway, and anybody who listens to Moving Panels, my show, know that I have a section called Weird Science.
Yes.
I am all for, I understand superhero movies and whatnot have their own rules,
Mhm.
and that physics can sometimes be broken. I get that, but you've got to stick to the rules and the physics within
Right.
your own universe.
Right.
And I don't care if you're saying that computers have the ability to do some of this stuff. There's still things that computers shouldn't be able to do,
Right.
no matter what. And so, and then the fact that that Gus creates this supercomputer.
Mm-hmm.
I get that this is again going to that weird science. I get that you've established that he's got an innate sense for computer programming.
Right.
That doesn't make him a engineer. That doesn't allow him to know how the hardware works. And then the fact that they are able to create the supercomputer out of the most basic drawings on a bunch of napkins makes no sense. Even less sense the fact that Ambrosia knows how it all works. Yeah, man.
And then they bring the box containing all the pieces into a canyon and land it in the middle of the canyon, and then expect the guys to carry it up to the caves.
Yeah.
So, gosh, it's so much. Okay, we've got to start wrapping it up.
And then don't give you easy access because they even have to take the little hot air balloons, chairs down to them.
You couldn't have found a better spot.
You couldn't have created some sort of way for us to get to the cave without having to risk our lives on these balloons. Man. Okay.
All right, moving on. So, speaking of inconsistencies, the year the film is set in is also very inconsistent. The year on Gus's checks say 1983, 20th high school reunion makes it appear to be 1985 because it reads class of 65, and the Olympics
20-year reunion
appearing to be in the summer should be happening in 1984.
84. Yes.
So,
yeah.
Just pick a year, any year.
No. And if you have any questions about any of this, just dial the number 123456778.
Right. Because it'll also get you in a class to teach you how to make computers do whatever you want them to do.
Yes. Pay attention in that opening scene when Gus receives the matchbook with the ad on it. That is the phone number.
Yep.
It is 123456778.
Yep.
They didn't even care to put a fake 555 number on it. Someone found a template. That was the number that was there. And and so that's what you got. Man. Can we get into the supercomputer? The fact that Gus built it so that there's just a single screw.
Right. That shuts off all the power.
That does it all. And then why is there an axe?
Exactly.
Why is there an axe in there? Makes no sense.
None at all.
Makes no sense.
All right. So my last trivia thing, and only because we've kind of already discussed this, about the huge picture of young Clark Kent at the reunion. is a picture of Christopher Reeve, a real
Yes.
picture of his high school picture.
Yes.
But in the Superman 1978 version, Clark Kent was not played by Christopher Reeve. He was played by Jeff East, even though they gave him prosthetics to make him look more like Christopher Reeve. That didn't
or
work.
Smallville Clark Kent was played by.
Yeah. So why? I mean, it would have made more sense for them to use the old picture than a Christopher Reeve picture.
I don't know. I mean, Lana Lang technically was in the first movie as well, and played by a different actress.
They didn't have her picture showing up, in the. Oh yeah, they did have. They had a young picture.
They had the picture of her with Brad.
Right. That's right.
Where they were like the prom king and queen or homecoming king and queen, whatever they were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of give that one a pass a little bit, as much as I complain about how, it's Christopher Reeve without glasses on.
Mm-hmm.
If it had been a picture of Jeff East, I think there probably would have been a certain group of the audience who would not have realized.
Right, they would have put it together.
Even if it said Clark Kent underneath it, they would go, "Who the crap is that?" Like,
right.
I think so I can give that one a little bit of a pass. Yeah, it doesn't make 100%. And some people would argue, well, Jeff East was when he was younger. I was like, well, no, he's Jeff East up till the very moment that he's not. Like when he leaves, he's Jeff East. Like, and again, I think you can go back and listen to one of our 2 episodes talking about the original movie. We're assuming he finished school,
right?
And so the Jeff East you see tell Martha, bye, and leaves and creates the Fortress of Solitude. You would think that's got to be at least maybe a 17, 18-year-old version of Clark.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly a picture from him in high school should look like Jeff East.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I can give that one a little bit of a pass. I don't have too much problem with that. But yeah, the years don't make a lot of sense, because the years start coming and they don't stop coming. But yeah, I don't have too much of a problem with that. But I can see the years are frustrating. But yeah, the Clark Kent being Christopher Reeve I'm fine with it. I'll let it pass.
All right, box office. Superman 3 was released on June 17th, 1983. It took the #1 spot at the box office on its opening weekend because it had no other new releases to compete with. Although it did dethrone Return of the Jedi from the #1 spot in its 4th week of release. So
that's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. It grossed $60 million at the United States box office and $20.2 million internationally, for a total of $80.2 million worldwide. It was the 12th highest grossing film of 1983 in North America. So, we talk about, there's some people that say that it bombed. It didn't bomb. It just didn't make as much money as the previous movies, but it made a lot of money over its budget. So that's still considered
because
a successful
it had a much smaller budget than, considering the first movie was like the most expensive movie at the time.
At the time, yeah, exactly.
Ever made.
Yeah.
So
after that, they were trying to cut that cost to make that money.
I'll tell you what, though, they were doing it off of product placement.
Yeah. We had KFC. Okay, KFC was pretty big.
Which is funny, considering the movie before this, Supergirl, had the big famous, which pretty much you Google Supergirl, you go to images.
Yep.
It will be a picture of Supergirl standing in front of a Popeyes.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And then Gus is smoking Camel cigarettes. They see that cigarettes. Clearly.
Even though in Superman 2, they had Superman get thrown into a Marlboro
sign. Yep.
And then there's a couple of Pepsi cans clearly visible in this movie.
Right.
But then again, you go back to Superman 2, he gets thrown into a Coca-Cola sign.
Yeah. So, yeah. Everybody wants a piece of that Superman pie.
Opportunity for sponsors.
Yeah. Yep.
They aren't going to stick, they aren't going to have the one sponsor and be biased and say, it's not like, everybody has to have an iPhone. Unless you're the bad guy.
Right, then you can't have an iPhone.
You can't have an iPhone. But it's not going to be that everybody is eating or drinking the same food. We're going to disperse it among, hey, you know what? We gave Popeyes a chance in Supergirl. Now we're going to give KFC.
Right.
Although I think KFC also appeared in Superman 2. But we're going to give KFC a chance here. Pepsi, Coke, we'll have them swap it out. Yeah, get that product placement in.
There you go. Every time they come to about product placement, I always go back to Wayne's World. Or is it Wayne's World? Yeah, when he's like, I don't want to sell out. Anyway, that's one of my favorites. All right, we've come to the part of our show we took a look at how well the 80s flick holds up today. It's the all-new rewatchability nostalgia meter. It's our way of measuring how enjoyable a movie is for repeat viewings along with waves of nostalgia. Here's how it works. It's a 1 to 10 scale. Any number between 1 and 10 will do. Here are a few parameters to help you decide. At the bottom of the meter is a number 1. I saw it once and that was enough. Don't need to rewatch it ever again. Right in the middle, a number 5 is a good rewatch every couple of years. You know, it's got some redeeming qualities, but not something you want to watch on a regular basis. And the top of the chart, the top of the meter, is a number 10, highly rewatchable and full of nostalgia. You can watch repeat viewings without ever getting tired of the movie. So, Laramie, where does Superman 3 land on your rewatchability and nostalgia meter?
All right, so I'm going to start off by saying, no, this is not a good movie.
Yes.
If we are ranking this as how good of a movie it is, it would be much lower.
Mm-hmm.
But this is about nostalgia.
Yes.
This is a Christopher Reeve movie.
Mm-hmm.
It is a movie from my childhood. Yes, I am a bit biased. I'm a huge Superman fan, but I probably have to put this movie at about like a 7.5.
Okay. Okay.
You know, again, not great,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not, for nostalgia purposes, it's not bad. This is a movie that I would watch every couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
this is also a movie that if I'm, you know, watching television, or if I'm, you know, on a, you know, Tubi or something, and I'm going through channels, you know, on Pluto TV or something, and I notice
Mm-hmm.
that it's playing, I'll stop and watch it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is a good, you know, if I want to have something on while I'm, you know, cleaning up or doing something, this is a good background movie that I don't have to give it my full attention, but that I don't, you know, get annoyed that I'm watching it. You know, I stop and watch a couple of scenes, you know, but I'm not upset that it's not going to pull me so far into it that I'm not going to be able to do whatever I'm doing.
Right.
So
right.
I think this falls as like a 7.5 for me.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty close to that. I'm right at a 7. I was kind of like upper, like 6.8 to a 7 for a lot of the same reasons. It's nostalgia. The nostalgia is what gives it that bump. Because like I said, I remember watching this a lot as a kid. It wasn't my favorite Superman movie. I think my favorite is still, for nostalgia, it's Superman 2 because I saw that one more. The first Superman is probably still my favorite. But yeah, but it's not one that like I said, it's not one I'm going to want to rewatch a lot. But it's not bad. It's worth putting on every so often. And we talk about this with Superman 4. It's a fun bad movie. Like, it's fun to watch, even if you're going to make fun of it, like we did on this, make a lot of fun about things in the movie that don't make sense. It's that makes it almost more enjoyable by laughing at the things that you shouldn't be laughing at. So I'm going to give it a 7.
So let me ask you, since we did just cover Superman 4 over on Moving Panels, my podcast,
Mm-hmm.
which one's better, 3 or 4?
I think solely on nostalgia, because as I mentioned on your episode about Superman 4, I don't think I ever saw Superman 4. Or I take it back. I think I saw that one in the theater and realized it was a bad movie, and I never watched it again. So it wasn't one that I watched a lot as a kid. So for me, that I'm going to put 3 slightly over 4 just because of nostalgia. Which one is better? They're really, it's too close to call for me.
See, I slightly give 4 an edge over 3, in my opinion. And this is primarily because 4 feels more, it feels more cohesive, slightly.
Yeah.
Because
Still
there is at least
problematic.
one, there's at least one story happening,
Right.
for the most part. For the most part, there's a couple of little side stories and plots happening, you know, B and C plots.
Right. A lot of messages they had to get in there.
Yes, but it at least is all cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
And having an actual villain for Superman to have to go against, you know, it makes it more of a superhero comic book movie. Not to say that premise of, you know, that you came up with of what Superman 3 could have been would not have been great. I just think for what we have, Superman 4 at least feels to me like an actual Superman movie, whereas as we've talked about, Superman 3 is a Richard Pryor movie that is a Richard Pryor movie being put inside of a Superman movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I agree with that
that's why
statement.
they're both bad movies.
But
they're both fun bad movies, as Tim just said. But I would say if you had to tell me to rank them, I would put Superman 4 over Superman 3.
Okay.
Personal opinion.
Yeah, and that's why I have you on the show. All right, well, let us know where you think Superman 3 and Superman 4 rank on the rewatchability and nostalgia meter. Which one you think is better than the other? You can send us an email, or you can let us know on social media, as we mentioned before, Facebook, Instagram, and you can make a comment right here in the YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can put the comments right there. All right, I think that's going to wrap this one up. I want to thank Laramy for joining us for this episode. So what's going on with moving panels? As I'm starting my summer series, you have a summer series as well. What you got going on?
We do. This summer, we are focusing on the work of Mark Millar.
Mm-hmm.
Again, most people would say Millar. I have as well, and I probably will slip up throughout the summer and say it, but I did learn that it is pronounced Miller, so it more like Miller, but the A has more of an E sound. Anyway, but yeah, we're gonna tackle who he is for people who aren't as familiar with who he is. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about his use of social commentary and violence within his comics, which of course then portrayed into the movies. And we will discuss Wanted, Jupiter's Legacy, the Netflix series, and then both Kick-Ass and Kick-Ass 2. Cool. We can't get to all of his work in one summer, but we'll highlight a few of those.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Those are some good ones. I think I enjoyed those for sure. So I would definitely check out Moving Panels. As I said before, if you enjoy this episode about Superman, go listen to the other episodes that we've done either on my show or his show or both. Check them all out. So if you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, as I mentioned before. Visit us on the website, 80sflickflashback.com, or our T-Public store for some awesome 80s Flick Flashback merch and original designs. Just launched some new designs a few weeks ago from some previous episodes. Designs inspired by previous episodes like Caddyshack, UHF, and Weird Science. I actually got 2 new ones I need to put on there. Hopefully that'll be out before this episode drops. So, all right. Well, thanks, Laramy, for joining. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'm Tim Williams for the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. My friend, you are yesterday. Whomever pulled off this caper is tomorrow.